Right then. Hello, willkommen, bienvenue, konnichiwa. It's time for another Amish Inquisition, episode 340 on Sunday, the 11th of August, 2024. I'm Phil.
And I'm Matt.
No Ben this week, but we're very happy tonight to be joined once again for his hat-trick appearance.
Yeah, hat-trick.
Dan Stevens. How you doing, Dan?
Well, chaps, hat-trick, is it really?
It is.
Yeah.
It's the third time.
When was the first time we spoke?
Oh, I want to say, would it be 2022?
Jesus.
Ooh,
I think we did ancient history first time.
Yep.
And then we did geoengineering last time.
Yep.
And this time we're doing the state of things, current affairs. Let's talk about some topical stuff because
Topical medley.
We might struggle. We were saying we might struggle because there's not really been anything happening in the UK the last couple of weeks, has there?
No, it's been quiet. Yeah. And obviously social media is a far safer place now. So that gives us even less to talk about.
Yeah. We've seen a tragic event in Southport. It's interesting how it's primarily been sort of northern working class deprived areas. I mean, old mill towns that sort of were thriving, bustling areas in the Industrial Revolution and were part of the sort of backbone of the British Empire's economy. And over the last sort of 50 years or so, through things like automation and our manufacturing base being exported overseas, these towns have sort of been left behind. And it seems that we're, rather than being, it's funny, you keep hearing this sort of soundbite that the UK is the fifth largest economy in the world or the fifth richest country in the world. And it really isn't. It's a poor country with a very rich capital city.
Yeah, and places like Birmingham are, I haven't been to Birmingham for a while, and we was up there probably a year ago, and I didn't recognise it. It was just a completely different city, and people are unhappy with the state of things at the moment, and they're trying to vent that frustration and speak out about it, and I think they're probably a bit scared to say anything at the moment. Do they say the wrong thing, and what is the wrong thing? And what contexts are people kind of like not allowed to say the wrong thing as well? And we've seen people this week being sent to prison for posting things on social media that, when you really delve into what they've said, arguably, you could argue these people deserve to be sent to prison. For example, asking people to burn down a travel lodge or a Holiday Inn, is clearly inciting violence. And that is clearly criminal. It's that simple. So I think it's important to kind of really get a grasp on what people are actually doing versus what, some accounts on Twitter might want you to think these people are actually doing. There's a big difference between saying the wrong thing in jest, or saying the wrong thing with the intent to, cause civil unrest and kill people. Yeah. And that applies to Labour's own MPs as well, who are threatening to...
it was a councillor, wasn't it? Was it a local Labour councillor in one of the cities? There's a video of him, and he was saying, basically, the people who were protesting, the anti-immigration protesting, we need to slit their throats.
Wow.
On camera in front of a crowd, and there's these people clapping next to him.
But it's a bizarre scenario because what he says is we need to slit the throats of the right wing, his words, not my words. Yeah. And then screams free Palestine after that. So you seem to be seeing this weird scenario playing out where you could argue that they're trying to almost create a distaste for Muslims, while at the same time saying that we want to save Muslims from a potential genocide in Palestine. So the messaging that you see on X is just so confused, and the messaging you're seeing on social media in general and mainstream media in general is super confused. And I don't know why. I don't know if it's an agenda, and this is all premeditated, planned, and rolled out through state actors and intelligence agencies and things like that. Or it's just the way things have played out. The whole scenario is bizarre. Really, really bizarre.
Assuming it is a sort of, let's just assume that it's an organic occurrence just for the time being. One of the big issues that was put about on X and other places was that it was misinformation about the identity of this murderer. That led to this outpouring of rage from certain sectors. And my immediate thing is, well, what happens if it was, or next time, if it isn't,
well, I think this
a guy
is
who's born here?
Bernie's account, isn't it? And she apparently was arrested, held for 24 hours. Then they got an extension for another, I think it's 12 hours, 12 and a half hours they're allowed. And then eventually released her on bail pending further investigations. So, is it an exercise in optics? Is something else going on behind the veil of X? The information she apparently released is in some way linked to Russia. But everything is in some way linked to Russia these days. But what else is going on behind the facade of social media is quite hard to tell, especially when you look at these accounts as well, and you ask whether, who are these people really? What are they doing? What are they up to? What are they playing at? So if people need to be arrested and interrogated, so be it. There might be other things going on behind the scenes that we're unaware of that you don't see on the kind of superficial side of X. But it's quick to jump on this and say, this one of these young lads has been sent to prison because he made a post on social media and only 5 people liked it. But the reporting on that I looked at when you dig into the case further is that, he did get 5 likes on this post, but he then reshared that to 150 friends who then shared it again, and it got 15,000 impressions, something crazy like that. So it's not just that.
Did they arrest everyone who shared it as well?
Well, they're an
end?
unwitting recipient, aren't they?
No, if they shared it, if they reshare it on Facebook, it's 150 friends.
Potentially. I've seen reports there was 750 people arrested in relation to all of this. But here's an interesting thought, right? I've been following these stories now since 2016. And in the build up, in the period between 2016 and 2020, I was closely following the stories of like Fusion GPS and the Steele dossier and all the stuff that went with this. And what I've noticed with these, this past month's kind of news cycle is, in a way, it mirrors the news cycle that we saw 4 years ago in the build up to the 2020 election. So, for example, by the end of July 2020, we had the whole BLM stuff kick off. And at the end of July 2024, we've had these protests and riots kick off. At the same time, at the end of, I think it was the beginning of August 2020, we had the stories coming out about Prince Andrew and his relationship to the Maxwell Epstein scenario. And then, of course, in the beginning of August 2024, they released a story about Hugh Edwards pleading guilty to being in possession of child pornography. And then at the same period in 2020, you see government calling for more censorship of Twitter and social media, and you see Facebook start putting fact check notes all over like COVID information. And obviously since then, we know that the CIA, FBI, other state agencies were involved in censoring talk and people's comments on COVID were being censored. Clearly, if people thought that it was a fake pandemic or the vaccines were slightly suspicious, Facebook was censoring that. So that was in like mid-August 2020 when that really started gaining momentum. But here we are in mid-August 2024, where we're seeing exactly the same push for exactly the same thing. So the news cycle is mirrored. It's almost like there's a news cycle script. The stories don't need to be the same, but the optics do. Optics of protests and riots, optics of paedophilia, optics of more censorship. And it's exactly the same as the 2020 news cycle. So you can kind of predict what's going to happen between now and the US election by looking at what happened then and
Right.
seeing what kind of optics he was seeing, and it's interesting. And I think I put a tweet out before all this kicked off saying, something quite big is simmering. Does anyone want to know what it is? And obviously here we are, something quite big has really come out where they've pulled up these rioters, arrested them pretty much immediately, opened up the courts immediately, and basically issued sentences within 7 days. So, which is bizarre, which is unheard of.
Strange, yeah.
And the whole thing stinks of like a Stasi show trial. But maybe rightly so. If these kind of football thug type hooligans that have got no real interest in politics are trying to incite racial hatred and calling for people to do pretty horrendous things, burn down holiday inns, travel lodges, etc. They should be in prison. That's not what one does on social media. Certainly not what I would do. Certainly not what you guys would do. So there's a big difference between people seeking truth and people trying to clean things up, versus some of the other stuff that we've seen. And obviously these comments stretch to Labour's own politicians that have made those comments that we mentioned earlier. So yeah, really bizarre times, but not unusual. Mirrors 2020, and I think it will carry on mirroring 2020 as the months and weeks go by.
It strikes me that the people rioting are kind of useful idiots, essentially.
Well, that brings me on to the next point, actually,
right.
Because do you remember in the BLM stuff where there was a lot of comments being made about who these people really were, who were kind of pulling down statues and trying to kind of deface statues of Winston Churchill and all this stuff.
Yeah.
And it turned out, well, it didn't. I won't say it turned out, because that's probably wrong. But there was a lot of suspicion that it was being funded by kind of Antifa, and people like George Soros were funding these useful idiots. Now, if I was the Prime Minister and I knew that someone was trying to infiltrate British society and stir up this trouble, would it make sense to come down really, really hard? Because, if you was a young lad who was getting a bit of money to go out and create anarchy, maybe you'd think twice now. So it's an interesting theory.
Yeah.
But it was definitely the situation. Do you remember that I think a group of BLM, Antifa, rioters, thugs, protesters, whatever you want to call them, like took possession of a whole square or 2 squares in New York City and closed it off and said, this is now whatever it was.
It was Chicago, I think, wasn't it? It was, I can't remember the name. It was something zone. And they set up.
Yeah, there was 2. There was.
Oh, was it? It was one in New York.
Yeah. And it was almost like the nation was under attack. So the question is, well, who was really behind that? You see the optics of police trying to rein it in. These people saying, look, this is our new area of Chicago. It's like a BLM zone or a woke zone, whatever they were doing. In my view, it probably does make sense to come in pretty heavy-handed, stamp this out now before it gets out of hand. Especially if I'm not saying it was someone like George Soros, but if it was those type of people funding this, and you've only got to look at the way these protests are these supposed reactionary protests happened, and look at the banners that these people are holding, and you can see that
they're
well printed,
they're
well made, yeah, they're well delivered. They just happen to be in the right place at the right time, where these I think Walthamstow was a good example, where these people had no idea that these protests and these kind of like far right Nazis were going to be hitting their town. And what they did, like good old British citizens, is they charged out onto the streets and said, no, we don't want your racism here. But then pulled out all these placards and banners that were all professionally made and put on wooden stakes, and they were all completely consistent with each other. The messaging was the same, the media was the same, the whole kind of lockstep Mockingbird media repeating exactly the same message. and it's all a bit long in the tooth now. We see through this crap straight away. You know, you look at this stuff take place, you give it an immediate sniff test, and what do you smell? You know, it's crazy.
Yeah, I think I'm looking at the BLM riots, the fiery but mainly peaceful protests from 2020 is instructive. And George Soros is well known through his arm of the Open Society Foundation for funding sort of left-wing causes, and the judiciary in America, the way it works there, he gets his prosecutors in, he handpicks, his organisation handpicks who they want and funds campaigns to get people like Kamala Harris to be DA of California, that sort of thing. The Soros sisters, they call them. Soros sisters tend to be black, female women that are pushed into places of power. And some of the crazy stuff from the BLM riots were these pallets of bricks just arriving on the streets in the morning, ready to be used. And you've got like videos of that umbrella man, the guy who's all in black. He's got like black shades on, and he's just walking past the store with, he's got his umbrella up, and he's walking past the store with a hammer, just every window down the front. An obvious agent provocateur caught on film. And I've not seen any of that yet so far, but I've not really watched a lot of the coverage. I've tried to isolate myself from it, really, to a degree.
Yeah. I think the BLM stuff is interesting, because you're right in what you're saying. I was following this, and they were absolutely doing that in more than one state. They were delivering pallets of bricks. Yeah. People were aware that this was happening. They was calling it out. Social media companies like Facebook and definitely Twitter started censoring that. Like Twitter's in under different ownership now. So things did look very different then, and the whole scenario stunk of you know, being organised, being political, being well funded, and it was a globalist attack on the judiciary and the states within the US and the cities, and it left its scar. So do we want that happening in the UK? No, not really. I don't want it happening where I live. You don't want it happening where you live. Are we more volatile than we were then 4 years ago? Absolutely. You know, the immigration problem is what it is. You know, we're all aware of people arriving on the shores of Eastbourne and, you know, Brighton and wherever else is happening, getting out dinghies and just walking into a local town and moving in.
The small boats thing is such a red herring, man. It's like 20, 30,000 a year, they're saying, max on the small boats. Last year's net migration was 750,000. It's like, it's not even 5% of the people coming in are on the small boats. I mean, it's tragic because people are taking that risk. It's the funding organised crime by paying these, what do you call it, traffickers, is what they are, people traffickers. And people are losing their lives in the process rather than going through the normal channels or the legal channels. But it's funny how our political system, the amount of oxygen that was sucked into this small boats question in the run up to the election, and you got all this bullshit about Rwanda. We're going to fly them all to Rwanda and all this, and it was such a red herring when the issue, it turns out, was the actual net migration, the legal migration, which is just seems unsustainable if it's going to be 3.75 million a year.
Yeah, and of course, where are they coming from? You know,
China's number 2, I think.
Well, you know, like with, you know, NATO, the UN, whatever you want to call it, has destroyed a lot of the homeland for these people.
Yep.
In a way, we're obliged to take them on. You know, you break it, you buy it, and this is what's happening. And this goes back to, you know, people like Alistair Campbell, Tony Blair, etc., weapons of mass destruction, and we're now seeing the problems from, you know, that are a consequence of decades of corruption, you know, military industrial complex getting greedy, endless wars, propaganda, you know, and that's before we get into the other issues of like geoengineering, cloud seeding, weaponizing the weather. And it's just insane. It really is insane. Where this is all going, I don't know. I think it's just broken. It's beyond broken. And you know, there's not much we can do. We are where we are.
Yeah, I think the top 5 countries Oh, probably India, Bangladesh, China, Nigeria, and one other, maybe Pakistan.
Is it not students though as well that take
Maybe.
up hundreds of thousands of the whatever spots on the immigration stats?
Could be. I don't know.
But the other thing as well, it doesn't stop the drain on the thing is about resource, isn't it? And not being able to get a GP's appointment and a dentist and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
So if you, I think, because I've got a little bit of experience working in universities and working with students and stuff, I'm pretty sure that you get access to a GP if you come as a student and you're paying and all the rest of it, and you're staying only for 3 years. But if it is, that net figure is 750,000 a year, it obviously puts more strain on, again, with like an aging population. And like you say, the small bolts thing is such a small amount of that.
It's a diversion.
Yeah, and all the
look
noise.
At this, don't look at that.
Yeah.
This is where
And
we are.
but the other thing as well is like, what these people are coming in to do. So I think there's a lot of people coming on like care work visas because those are jobs that need filling essentially. It obviously probably keeps wages low, unfortunately, but that's a reality, that care is something that's ever increasing in terms of childcare, but also like adult social care as well, working in care homes and things like that. And the other thing as well I remember is how many people were sacked in 2020 from care homes, or 2021.
Oh, because of the mandates.
Yeah.
It was, I think it was something like 70 or 80,000.
So all those people need replacing probably because they've all gone to work in Aldi and Tesco maybe.
Yeah.
Or
Well,
elsewhere.
are they? Because you self-checkouts now. So
Well, yeah.
those places.
Well, maybe,
Not at Booths. Do you know Booths, a supermarket chain Booths? It's a northern thing.
Right. No.
It's like an upmarket northern supermarket.
Well, it's like an upmarket Waitrose.
Right. Yeah, it's like the Waitrose
Right.
of the north. It's a family established firm, maybe
Yes.
100 years ago. And they installed self-checkouts around 2020. And they've about 3 months ago announced that they're U-turning and they're ripping them all out because the
Ripping them all out.
customers want to
Yep.
be served by people.
A live person.
Yeah. So that's
Well,
a
this is
move
the
in the
issue,
right
isn't it?
direction.
We're losing our contact with people. You sit in a crowd of people, and all of them are sitting there looking at their phones. And
Yep.
when we talk about this stuff, they want you locked in a digital ID and digital currency, and they want to put you in a matrix and all this kind. We're already there. We're all just non-stop glued to our phone. Like this stream is going out on YouTube, and people will be watching that now on their phone, and you'll come off and you'll be looking at X on your phone or Instagram, and it's breaking society down because you've not got any human interaction. Even when you're amongst humans, they're all interacting with their phones instead of each other. So it's really interesting times, a strange time to be alive, definitely.
It's so much easier to control people via messaging when they're so absorbed with social media and their devices, isn't it? And the news outlets.
Yeah, and also there's you can distract people, you can put misinformation out there, disinformation, but you can also there are people putting good information out there. So if you said, well, we're in a dark period of human history, the light will eventually shine through the darkness. And although things seem quite bad now, the point is we now know about this stuff that we didn't. Like we're talking about weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, what Campbell was doing, what Blair was doing. But back then, not as many people knew about this stuff. And the fact that we're able to see it now means it is bringing it to the surface and potentially shining light on stuff that was very dark. And that, I think, is going to be ultimately a painful process that we've just got to wait out. Every year, like I asked you earlier how many shows we've done now, and when we first started speaking, we thought shit was crazy then. And every year I think like every January for the last 4 years, I've put on a post on X saying if you thought 2020 was mental, wait until you get to 2021. You get to 2021. You like if you think that was mental, wait until you get to 2022.
Yeah.
You know, you're in 2024 and like, fuck it, I just look stupid now. You know, this is going to be a mad one, and that's where we are.
Yeah.
And like we're not even at November at the end of this election cycle now.
Yeah, it's going to get even
cycle,
crazier before the end of the year.
Yeah. You know, this is like the box set that just keeps on giving.
Well, that's a good thing actually. Maybe to talk about is what do you make of what happened with Trump? Then
Oh yeah, the assassination.
Well, I put it on X. I called bullshit on it within 5 seconds of seeing it. You know, this is the situation. You hear bang, he goes and grabs his ear, falls down to the floor, gets up, and he's got like, you know, tomato ketchup all over the place. And someone done a bit of a forensic breakdown of this and said that none of the blood was running down his ear. It all looked really, really suspect. Like, what do you make of that? Like, there were people who called bullshit on it. There were people that said that the guns that fired the shots were the Secret Service on the roof. So as the bangs go, you can see when Trump dives down on the floor. So the shooter can't have been the shooter. So that was debunked. And then miraculously, they find a new shooter that no one knew existed in this part of the building. And then that was debunked. And then they find another new shooter. And it's like, come on, guys. How far do you want to go with all this stuff?
So you reckon Trump?
I don't for 1 minute believe it was legitimate.
So you think Trump set it up then?
Yeah, you can literally see. I put it on X where he like literally drops something as he back on the table as he goes down, and his ears healed up. You know, his ears healed up miraculously, and then you've got all these QAnon followers going, "Yeah, well, that's because he's the chosen one and the Messiah." And you're like, fucking hell. You know, like, come on, like that. But the problem is, these people are so susceptible to this kind of bullshit and nonsense now. But likewise, the cynic could argue that equally, people are paranoid. Maybe he didn't make it up. This is just my view. Perhaps I'm paranoid. You know, perhaps I'm borderline schizophrenic or something. I've got no idea. But to me, if you ask me, you know, I've told you what I think. It looked like he made it up. I called bullshit on it within five minutes of watching it. Put it on X. And as you both know, I always use X to manage and monitor the bot responses. And it went mental. It was non-stop bots, snidey looking accounts going, of course it wasn't, people like you, blah, blah, blah. Look what happened to Alex Jones. I'm going to issue proceedings against you. We're going to take you down for billions of dollars. You're like, of course you are. You're some fucking hillbilly, redneck in a log cabin in the arse end of like Colorado somewhere, is waiting for Trump to save the world. Like, you're really going to issue legal proceedings, aren't you, for $1 billion? Like, fuck off. It was just crazy. But it, you know, the posts were really aggressively being astroturfed by accounts that didn't look real. So someone wrote the algorithm, someone set the bots up, and someone implemented that campaign. Simple as that. So that's my opinion. I looked at the video, I made a view on it, I called it out, and then I sat back and watched the bots comment on it to try and see what was really going on. And that, you know, as we've said before, that's predominantly what I do with X. I put stuff out there and I monitor the response from the bots, because that's what's important. Those bots are a bit like you know, when you see the Wizard of Oz and she opens her windows and asks the monkeys to fly and do the witch's bidding. These bots are a little bit like that. You know, they're a massive tell in their own right, and they frequently give the game away. And we've seen this with the geoengineering. We've seen lots of people posting pictures of the spraying. We've seen a massive, like multi-million-pound bot campaign trolling the arse out of all of these posts. They're always an account that was set up in maybe 2004, early days 2004. They've always got 40 followers. They've always done like 20,000 tweets. You know, they're always a football supporter. They always want to look like some kind of right-wing Nazi, you know, like a good old, like, football hooligan lad down the pub that knows, you guys are talking rubbish. It's always the same. And, everyone that's been posting the geoengineering stuff knows that. You just block them, hide the comments and move on. But it always happens in the same way as well. You'll post a geoengineering post, you'll get 40 people saying, oh my God, I've seen it, this is happening in my area, ladies doing videos, like people in France taking pictures, people in Switzerland taking pictures, people in Italy and Belgium, in Germany, in America, commenting on it, and then bang on 40. It just gets a super big AstroTurf campaign, and it's like, you're a melt, you're an idiot, moron, old man shaking his, old man scared of clouds, and, memes of Abe Simpson shaking his fist at a cloud, and same old. And the vocabulary is the same. The tone is the same. The memes are the same. And if you delete one, block that, it'll be replaced with another one. If you get into an argument with it, it will go and go and go and go and go. And you could be there all year arguing the toss with these guys.
What?
Who's setting it all up? Who's behind it all?
Oh, well, that's going to be my next question, was if you could speculate on who's... You mentioned the witch.
Honestly?
The witch releasing the monkeys, the flying monkeys. Do you think it's 77th Brigade or intel agencies or some sort of private concern?
I think it's Matt.
Right. Why don't you retweet us? Send the bots for us.
But I don't know. I might as well be saying it. We don't. It's impossible to say. Like, all you can see is that there is an entity and a group of people, or a collective group of different people running these campaigns. Is it the 77th Brigade? Maybe. It's obviously China.
It's obviously organised. So via process of deduction, there must be a handful of the most likely candidates. Surely.
I'll tell you one thing: is I'm pretty certain it's not Musk, and I'm pretty certain it's not baked into Twitter, because what they seem to be doing is adopting accounts that have either been set up a year and just kind of mothballed for a year.
Yeah.
They always look the same, so the same profile. They always say the same thing, and they're too obvious to be an X thing, say, rolled out by Musk, because he'd be able to do a bigger and better job with that. You wouldn't have every account with 40 followers, every account saying that. You could just set up, all sorts of AI generated fake profiles. But that is also going on. And there's different levels of these bots. There's very well done bots that you really wouldn't know. The accounts look really organic. I think they may be kind of like, like you say, 77th Brigade, British military, etc. And you might find that some of these really obvious accounts are actually intentionally obvious. Like you say, look at these, don't look at those ones. It's the same as the boats, isn't it? They get you focus on accounts that are so glaringly fake that you sort of don't notice the ones that aren't. So that's the way I would do it if I was going to debunk this. And this, unfortunately, this is what you're up against. It's high level, 5th generation warfare. I'm absolutely certain there's some sort of conflict going on between NATO and BRICS that we don't know about.
Yeah. Oh, interesting.
I, at one point, was looking at the geoengineering. I found a document wrote by the US military in 1992. And the title of the document was Owning the Weather as a Force Multiplier by the year 2025. And that was written by the US military, Navy, deep state conglomerate, whatever it is. And what they were saying in there was that the weather is more lethal than a nuclear weapon. It's more risky than making a nuclear weapon. Controlling the weather, manipulating the weather is more risky than splitting the atom. But what a weapon to have. For example, if Russia nuked America tomorrow, it would be blatantly obvious what happened, wouldn't it? If you covertly attack an enemy with a weather weapon against the backdrop of your manufactured climate change propaganda, how is that enemy ever going to know that directly came from you? So I started looking at a lot of the legalities and the case law. Unfortunately, I used to have an account with, or or my in-house solicitor had an account with LexisNexis, so we could look at the case law, but we haven't got that now. So I found some documents about sort of legal authorities and litigation on weather manipulation.
Right.
And these documents date back to 1976. I was born in 1975. So in 1976, there was litigation issued against the Israeli government by another country, France, Spain, whatever, whoever it was. That the sort of the legal argument was that that nation believed that Israel had potentially stolen their rainwater and manufactured exceptionally hot summers by manipulating the weather and creating clouds and cloud seeding that then pull in the rainfall that country would have got, and they've taken it of their own. And the legal argument on this was quite interesting, because what they were saying was that who actually owns the sky? So, for example, I move in next door to you and I create a small cloud in my back garden. And that then blows over to your back garden. Do you now own my cloud? Or am I intruding on your privacy with my cloud? That cloud, while it's over your back garden, starts soaking up moisture. And as it moves into Matt's back garden, it pisses down with rain. And ruins the extension that he was building. So the argument is, well, who's responsible for this? Because I made the cloud, it moved to your garden, it collected the rain, it ruined his extension. But this was the argument they were effectively raising in 1976. And what they were saying back then was it was unbelievable, unbelievably difficult to litigate these matters, because even if you had evidence that you'd made the cloud, it would be difficult to really predict how that cloud would have or wouldn't have affected things. So the conclusion you get from that is that when the courts are saying, really honestly, if you are geoengineering, you're kind of all screwed. There's no recourse there. There's no way we can accurately litigate matters. It's impossible to claim a loss. It's impossible to claim damages. So, hey-ho, the gloves are off. It's a free-for-all. Yep. And that seems to be what's happened since 1976 with this. That geoengineering has been a free-for-all since the 70s. And it's caused droughts, and it's caused famine, and it's potentially led to some of these kind of immigrants and the immigration problems that are moving out of those areas that we're also, invading and attacking and bombing. So there seems to be stuff going on with the weather in relation to NATO. Obviously, NATO are the ones that produced the document owning the weather as a force multiplier by the year 2025. If you think Russia and China and the BRICS nations haven't got the same weaponry, then you're absolutely delusional. We're seeing bizarre weather over our country. Likewise, they're seeing bizarre weather over their country. So the question is, are we hitting them with our weather weapons, and are they retaliating against us with their weather weapons? Now then, contextualize what we're talking about with regards to bots and social media and the manipulation of disinformation. If BRICS, for example, was targeting Britain with their weaponized weapons, would it make sense to then follow that up with kind of your good old British Bulldog type accounts on social media saying, I know the government are doing this over my head, the government are spraying us, etc., etc. And another interesting point, of course, is that when you look at the ingredients of the spraying per se, it's very similar to the ingredients of the vaccine. So why is that? Why does it just happen to be the case that the ingredients of the vaccine match the ingredients that are being sprayed?
Which ones specifically? I don't
Aluminium.
Right.
The mRNA tech, supposedly, that's in the clouds is also in the vaccines. Do you remember when I've said before that the geoengineering, we all know it was going on for years and years and years, but it took a quantum leap forward in 2020, in July 2020.
I remember that, yeah.
Right. And that was the point when they started mandating face masks, especially on aircraft. So if you're spraying this material at 30,000 feet, and the plane flying through the material is using 50% of the outside air is brought into the plane, 50% of the inside air is recycled. So it's a mix of 50% outside, 50% inside air, right? And you've now got aircraft up in that level flying through that crap. Would it make sense to tell all the passengers to wear face masks, given that you've never done an experiment of this scale before, and you don't really know what the consequences are going to be, or what the variants of those consequences are going to be if passengers are in the air breathing in this stuff?
I'd be pretty freaked out flying over the Atlantic in a jumbo jet and a cloud formed in the aisle.
Well, you don't know. It's just out there. It's cloud seeding, and it's also marine cloud whitening, where that's well documented as well.
Is
so
that
we see
is that the albedo thing? Is it called?
In essence, what they're doing is sort of steaming off the water and spraying the salt into the air, and then the salt's creating an ice type response with, forming precipitation, making clouds, and making it rain.
Right.
So, what the hell is going on with the weather? We don't know. You can see these patents. Again, you get into disinformation. How much of the patent stuff is real? How much of it is just decoy and distraction, misdirection? But we're living in la la land. The whole thing is crazy. None of us are voting for this stuff. Geoengineering represents an existential threat to government, because it's the single thing that none of us are aware of, none of us have voted for, and none of us would vote for. You can get into issues about race, knife crime, violence on the streets, protests, riots, prison sentence, etc. And that's all kind of, divide and conquer type stuff. But in my view, something like geoengineering would cross all of those boundaries. As it doesn't really matter if you're black, white, gay, straight, trans, anything. Who wants the government manipulating the weather, against the backdrop of the government telling all these different social groups that we're in the midst of this climate change, climate disaster, when the reality is actually the climate disaster is being caused by their attempts to control the weather as a force multiplier, so it can combat the financial stability and economic growth of countries that are in BRICS, like Brazil, India, China, Russia, Lebanon, etc. Which is what this document is really saying, that they're going to use the weather to cause droughts, stifle the stability, financial stability and growth of evolving nations. And this is what NATO are all about. They don't want someone else rising to power. But what we are seeing at the moment is BRICS are rapidly gaining traction. And again, I've put these posts out there, hashtagged with weaponized weather, BRICS versus NATO. Bang, they are completely shadow banned. If I put the same image out there without that, it will get like 30, 40, 50,000 views. If I tag in BRICS, NATO, weather weapons, it's fuck all. When I say fuck, I mean 200.
Yeah.
That's 200.
That's a lot for us. Huh? Yeah. Well, one of the interesting things that came out, I think it was today, or maybe it was yesterday, which sort of ties together the riots that we've had, plus the disinformation bureaus, and in relation to all kinds of conspiracies. Good news, Dan, we don't have to worry about future generations, because the Education Secretary is launching a review of the curriculum in primary and secondary schools, and it's going to teach our kids critical thinking, how to avoid putrid conspiracy theories, I quote.
Yeah, it's crazy, isn't it? And that tells you where they're at. The geoengineering thing kicked off. In response to that, the BBC wrote a hit piece saying that conspiracy theorists think that we're manipulating the weather. We're not manipulating the weather, but now they've said it, it might be a good idea to do it, but it is already $100 billion industry.
Oh, already? Yeah, so like trying to block out the sun, Bill Gates famously bitch tits himself.
Yeah. So we're not doing it, But now you said it, we might do it. But even though we're not doing it, we've already spent £100 billion of your money on it.
And more importantly, we probably should be doing it because of global climate warming change.
Yeah, which is a consequence of us having already done it.
God, I don't know where I am anymore.
I mean, think of the business plan. Think of the business plan. I come to you, Phil. I'm like, Dragon's Den stuff. I've got a great idea. It's genius. This is my business plan. I manipulate the weather. I completely fuck it up. You run a campaign to say that nature's messing it up. You then raise money, which you give to me to come in with a cure to put it all right again. And that we rinse and repeat that decade after decade after decade after decade. It's genius. And I don't think, like, I'll start again. At one point, I was looking at this thinking maybe something is going on that deems this to be a massive secret. Maybe there's a solar eruption happening. If we don't engineer the climate, block out the sun, we're all going to melt off the face of the planet, right? So maybe the controllers for the greater good are not telling society what's going on. They're keeping this covert. They don't want to panic everyone, et cetera, et cetera. All praise the controllers. But I think that's giving them too much credit. I think it is just a money spinner. I control the weather. I tell the public that the weather's gone tits up. Therefore, I'm able to then raise more money to invest into weather manipulation, because at some point it's really going to go tits up. I then do more experiments, make the weather go more bizarre, raise more money, and so on and so on and so on and so on. And we are where we are now, where things are just getting noticed by the public. They're calling this out. They can't stop people posting these images on X, on Telegram groups, etc. So what they're doing now is trying to create this situation where people are afraid to share images and information on social media, rein in conspiracy theories, boost it up, nail it down. But I think the ship has sailed. I think they're trying to put the proverbial horse back in the box after it's gone. So I think it's too late for them. I think they're desperate now. I think they're just clutching at straws. It's pretty sad times, really. But at the same time, it's positive in terms of people seeing this stuff, waking up to it.
It's interesting, again, going back to your man Elon, how he works into this scenario, because I think he's probably the #1 expert in the world when it comes to rinsing taxpayers for government subsidies. That's where he's made all his money with Tesla. Yeah. That's what gave him the money to buy Twitter. I don't know what the numbers are in America, but he absolutely rinses them for billions and billions of dollars for his clean, battery technology. And I always think of the space god. Do you remember when we had Chris Tolworthy on, and he was talking about the future, Jack Kirby's future predictions, and we were going to be overtaken by the space gods, the billionaire space gods, who were richer than God and going to go into space and fuck the rest of us.
Well, we're going there, aren't we? Yeah.
But Elon Musk, he's #1 prime suspect.
How do we know we're not there already?
Oh.
How do we know we've not been taken over by space gods already? When people say, "Oh, well, if the aliens were hostile, they'd have invaded by now." Maybe they already have. Maybe we're just like that corporation that you see in the movie Aliens, where they're just flying through space. She's on a fake mission. It turns out what they really want is the all-powerful alien. But it's starting to feel like that. Like we're clearly already in some kind of one world government. But it feels like there's more than two factions at war within this scenario. They didn't need to do COVID. COVID really kind of, blew their cover, and it was a step too far for a lot of people, and it's woken a lot of people up. Why do that? What was the net result of COVID? Like, they didn't have vaccine ID. They didn't bring through digital ID. They locked everyone up for a long time, threw a load of furlough money at those people, destroyed a lot of businesses. For what?
A lot of milking of us, the populations,
or just a lot of disinformation. Like there's it's an uncanny coincidence that the geoengineering clearly ramps up in 2020, right? At a point in time where global government is on its knees amidst the global pandemic, where they're all screwed. Come on, yeah, like really, like you're all in shit creek, guys. Like this is really the time where you're going to roll out an upscaled geoengineering operation. And that upscaled geoengineering operation isn't just a fiction, coming out of my imagination. There's an indication that they want to do something like this in the House of Commons report on the regulation of geoengineering that was published in 2009. And that report is very clear. It says that they need to be able to control the weather in case there's a point where we suddenly and rapidly need to cool things down. And they then refer to a global geoengineering experiment that needs to be done. That needs to supersede regional global geoengineering operations. They discuss how that global geoengineering operation will affect the weather systems everywhere. And then in 2020, you see what we've been seeing, the beginning of what we've been seeing for the last 4 years. Now, is it a coincidence that the contents of what they're spraying matches the contents of the vaccine? Is it a coincidence that at 3 or 4 months before they start spraying all this aluminium everywhere, the price of aluminium goes through the roof? Silver iodine is being sprayed as well. Silver goes through the roof at the same time. Now, if silver and silver and aluminium go up in price, but gold doesn't, then it starts raising questions as to what's going on. Like the commodity markets of the gold and silver, aluminium go up all collectively. Right? It'd be unusual if aluminium and silver went up. Well, surprise, surprise. What do you see in the alternative news cycles at the beginning of year 2020? Jazara, Nazara, the banks are going to collapse, go out and buy gold. What that does is it levels up the price of gold,
right,
to be consistent with the price of silver and the price of aluminium, and it buries the increase. But if you look at the trading cycles for aluminium, the people are buying it first. Then we get a fuel crisis. Where's all the fuel going? We need more fuel to do more spraying. And then when these toxic side effects start hitting people, you start seeing the vaccine rollouts. So they really ramp up spraying from July 2020 onwards. By January 2021, they're rolling out the vaccine. And that with that rollout comes a whole truth movement saying, yeah, the vaccines are going to make you ill. Definitely the vaccines. But don't look up. And actually don't look up, because we've put blue dots on your local high street pavement, which we want you to look at.
Yeah.
Oh, and by the way, do you all mind wearing face masks now, although we're 6 months into a pandemic?
And there's a new movie come on Netflix called Don't Look Up. There was a movie release, wasn't there?
That is correct,
Yeah,
yes.
don't look up. Yeah. So I'm just joining the dots here, and this is the thing. It's what's going on. Like, there are lots of people just asking what's going on. The government are now trying to clamp down on censorship like they did in 2020.
Yeah.
The news cycles are matching that. Like, it's crazy. It's an insane time to be alive, but at the same time a good time, because this is all being brought to the surface. Where would you sooner be? Oblivious to this stuff, completely unaware it's going on, or suspicious that something is going on, and having these questions, these sort of sessions where we're saying, well, what is it?
Yeah, and often coming away with more questions than answers, because we can't know a lot of these things. It's different when you get these documents. Like you sent me that tweet you did where you had links to these documents from the 70s, and you can go and read it all. It's all there. I love the term they used. It was it called rain rustling? They used for stealing people's rain.
Yeah, this is exactly what that litigation was about.
Yeah,
from 1976, and like a country was saying that we'd been rain rustled by Israel.
Yeah.
And the court was saying, fine, I get it. Now particularize your claim, properly particularize your claim. Tell me what would have happened if that cloud hadn't been in that place. Well, we don't really know. We think it might have, and it could have, and it perhaps come from this. And it's like, okay, there's an amount of proof that we need to see, and there's a burden on the litigant to prove that rain was rustled. And it's like, well, we can't really do that. And this is the issue. It's like, well, great, what a business model. These guys can rain rustle to their heart's content, and no one can do anything about it. Now, if you support that with a propaganda campaign to say that our rain rustling is climate change, you absolutely can't prove that now, because you've got the whole science community tied up in your climate change. Now, obviously, those scientists don't know that you're changing the climate and rain rustling. They're asking where the rain's gone, and you're saying, oh, I don't know. Maybe ask Cambridge University. They're asking Cambridge University, and they're like, oh, I don't know where the rain's gone, but we was working on this rain rustling project last week. But of course, couldn't be that. So they're all, it's like a big Mexican standoff where they're all like pointing a pistol-shaped rain cloud at each other. You get the gist of what I'm saying, though. It's from a world point of view, how is one nation going to prove that another nation has stolen its weather?
Yeah, so it becomes a free-for-all, which is where we're at now.
Yeah. And also, what happens if it goes wrong? What happens if my cloud doesn't go to your country, but it goes to another country? And I'm like, well, that was my cloud. Can we use your weather manipulation to push it back into my country? And this was another thing they touched on. It's like, once you've made the cloud, who owns it? Do you own the cloud when it's in your airspace, or do you own the cloud when it goes to the French airspace?
Who owns the weather?
Up the French weather. If it picks up the French precipitation and then moves to Spain, it's like, well, hang on, that was my English cloud that's now carrying French water that's pouring down in Spain. But these were the legal arguments they were addressing. Wow. Again, the House of Commons report refers to the legal implications of geoengineering. And I suspect, but can't confirm, that there's some international law that says if you are manipulating the weather, you can only do it for a period of 10 to 12 days. And that's why I think we're seeing these 10, 12-day cycles of non-stop rain and clouds that we saw through March, April, May, June. And then 2 days of completely clear skies, followed by the same 10 or 12-day cycle, because they're tied up in legislation, which means they can only conduct these geoengineering operations for maybe 10 or 12 days. They then have to let everything clear down, and that's exactly what we've seen. Right. Because it's unlikely that Mother Nature is going to say, look, I'm going to issue 10 days of rain, 2 days of sunshine, 10 days of rain, on repeat all the way through the winter, which is what we saw. Yeah. So it's worth looking. If anyone's looking at this geoengineering stuff, I know Geoengineering Watch do a lot of stuff on this, but they're not really covering any of the litigation that's been out there. If there's any lawyers or barristers that are looking at this, maybe jump on Lexus and start doing a deep dive for case law on rain rustling, case law on weather manipulation, and try and find what is going on in terms of international law when it comes to the rules on weather manipulation. BBC have already admitted this is a $100 billion industry, right? It looks like a free-for-all. There is international law involved with this. What is that international law?
Yeah, let's see it. Show us the money. We've taken over an hour already, Dan. Something I wanted to ask you, which we've never discussed. I wanted to know if you were familiar with this Malcolm Bendall thunderstorm generator stuff, and if you've got any views on that.
No, what is that? That's the first I've heard of that.
Oh,
should I have heard of it already?
I would have thought, because he's quite popular with like the alt history crowd and the sort of sacred geometry, Randall Carlson sort of axis of investigation. It's a guy who is probably a con man, allegedly. He could be a really nice fella. I don't know. Lots of people who I know are really sold on this, that this guy's invented a free energy machine, essentially, and it uses some sort of weird plasmoid cyclone technology to sort of generate thunderstorms in a bottle essentially, and then harvest the energy from that. If I'm something like accurate.
Really?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Maybe homework for you then. You have a look at this. I'd like to get your take on it at some point in the future, maybe.
Well, I think like going back, we obviously knew Ziggy Dan, and that's how I think we come into contact first of all. And like Phil's been on, mentioned my work with history, and you should really talk to Andrew from Ancient History Criticisms, because his work completely undoes most of Graham Hancock and Randall Carlson's work when it comes to the Younger Dryas. Purely because Hancock and Carlson allude to a pre-Diluvian civilization, which is really, in essence, the Aryan race, which is why Hancock has been accused of being a Nazi, because he's regurgitating the Aryan race concept, the lost city of Atlantis, and all this stuff. And what Andrew showed me probably about 4 years ago now was that all of these ancient sites have hallmarks that match. So the nubs, obviously, we're well aware of, right? We see the nubs all over Peru. We see nubs all over Egypt. But we also see nubs all over India. So there's 2,000 years separating India and the temples in India and the pyramids in Egypt. Now, you could just brush over that and say, oh, well, it was all part of an ancient alien race. It's like, fine, okay. Let's not brush over that. Let's look at the ancient levels of erosion, shall we? Because the erosion will give you an idea of how old this stuff really is. So in India, you see virtually no erosion on these sites. Where there's nubs, there's no erosion. In Egypt, where there's nubs, there is erosion, right? Now, what Hancock is saying is that the Sphinx, the side of the Sphinx, as per his relationship with Robert Schoch, shows that the Sphinx is eroded by water, and there wasn't water in Egypt,
since the Younger Dryas,
after the Younger Dryas event. So what I'm not saying is the Younger Dryas event didn't happen. It did. It formed the scablands in America. We can look at the Younger Dryas. We can see the impact zones of ice, ice projectiles that were thrown into the scablands and caused those big indentations.
Antonio Zamora, who we had on.
That's why you see no rock evidence there. There's no like meteorites or anything smashed up around those craters, because the thing that made the craters was ice.
Yeah.
So that absolutely happened. Did it wipe out a advanced pre-Diluvian, civilization, the Atlanteans, all this stuff? No. Is there evidence of advanced machining in Egypt? Well, there's evidence of machining that looks so much like our machine marks that, the logical thing to say is it's done by the same machines that we've got now. But the obvious point is we didn't have those machines when they were made. So the conclusion that Carlson and Hancock draw is that, well, if we didn't have those machines in 1750, we must have had them 16,000 years ago. It's like, well, the drill marks aren't eroded, are they? So if the drill marks and the saw marks aren't eroded to any degree of erosion that would suggest they were 14,000 years old, then they must be pretty recent. And I've been to Egypt, and I've been in all of the pyramids pretty much. I've been in the Serapeum of Saqqara. And you can cut your hands on the edges of these saw marks in the granite. They're so uneroded.
Fresh. They're so fresh.
Yeah, fresh as anything. So they're not 40,000 years old, right? And recently we discovered that the nubs also manifest themselves on the side of a cathedral in Paris that was built in 1550. And we got the pictures, the location of the cathedral, and everything that goes with it. So here we are, right, working backwards. We've got nubs in 1550 AD in Paris. We've got nubs in Peru. The Spanish conquistadors would say that was built in 1400 AD. Hancock would say, no, that was built 14,000 years ago. I would call bullshit on that, because there's no erosion on these cuts. I know another good friend of ours, Justin, would say the same. I know Andrew would say the same. I know Andrew's confronted Brian Forrester on this, and Brian was just like, well, needs looking at. It's like, well, you're the guy saying it's ancient aliens, you look at it. So my view is really different to theirs. I think we're living in a recent post-apocalyptic society, and something happened and buried everything to the same depth, in or around the same places at the same time. And what we're being told is the buildings that were destroyed as a consequence of that are ancient. Fine, that's the case. Where does all the dust and debris come from that buried it? Can't explain it. Easter Island is the best example of that. The statues in Easter Island, you've probably seen excavated statues, and now more is buried than is exposed. That's in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. Yeah, there's no way any of that dust and debris would have come from that island. But yet the burial depth of that is the same as what you see in Sardis in Turkey. Same burial. Yeah, completely different period in time. You go to the Forum in Rome, same burial depth, completely different period in time. You look at Baalbek, which is on the outskirts of the Sahara, the Mediterranean. So where you see visual evidence of destroyed buildings, it's normally on the peripheral zone of the Mediterranean. As you go further in towards Africa and Sahara, there's nothing. It just gets buried deeper and deeper and deeper until, I suspect something went bang, and literally deposited a huge amount of dust and debris all over the world. I suspect it was recent. A good thing to look at is the location of Australia, the way that the dust and debris is buried Easter Island across the Pacific, and look at how the sandbank is formed at the southernmost tip of South America as that blows through in towards Namibia. And you look at Namibia, which is the southernmost tip of Africa, and it's just a whole desert sandbank. And the desert sandbanks are always on the western side of these islands or continents, coming from the direction of Australia. It's like something went bang, it blew across the Pacific, it buried Easter Island, and you look at the straight line down the eastern edge of every island in the Pacific, and you'll see that it kind of fans out over towards the eastern edge. So the western edge is straight. The eastern edge kind of fans out into like a triangular shaped pattern, and so does the foot of South America, and so does South America itself. So there's lots of questions around the soil through South America and through these rainforests, and what that soil really is. No one can really explain where all the sand has come from, buried everything in the Sahara. That sand blows through the Sahara, through to the Mediterranean, destroys these sites like Baalbek. We all know how big Baalbek is. We all know how much effort it would have taken to move those blocks. Now try toppling those blocks. Yeah. So the focus is on who, like Ancient Aliens, non-stop History Channel, funded by Gaia, putting Carlson on there, putting Hancock on there. Ask yourself why Hancock was in Ethiopia. Ask yourself why Hancock was working with a Somalian dictator.
He was with he was with The Economist, which is a famous hive of spooks and intelligence for the intelligence agency. Yeah. He was a journalist for The Economist.
And guess what the bots tell you when you start criticizing Hancock? Yeah.
What?
So it's become a regurgitated version of the Aryan concept, this kind of ancient alien scenario. And that's why, in my view, you've got Gaia Vanguard. You've got Gaia. I think BlackRock and Vanguard are huge investors in Gaia TV.
Wow.
So you've got this kind of like raise your energy.
Mind you, they're major investors in everything.
What's that? Sorry,
they're major investors in everything, though, Dan. They own the fucking world.
All the things, come on. You've got Gaia TV saying, you can kind of vibrate your way out of tyranny, raise your frequency. We're all heading towards ascension.
Yeah, love and light. Yeah.
But it's like, okay. And who are they going to save you from? It's like, well, they're going to sort of save you from the bad guys. It's like, you're the bad guys telling us this. So it's almost like turn a blind eye, focus on this while we, destroy your economy, take all your assets and screw you over. But it doesn't matter, because if you focus on the light, you'll ascend your way out of it.
Cool.
Sorry, that's not going to happen. Although people are seeing through this cloud of darkness, which is setting over the Western world at the moment, and seeing some light at the end of the tunnel. Let's say it wasn't spiritual and it's just purely corruption. The level of corruption is getting so large and so great that it's corrupt. It's becoming clearly transparent. And once it's transparent enough, there's going to be a point where people can't hide it anymore. And the people that see this stuff are going to want to do something about it. And I think we're quite close to that period. And I think that's exactly why the government are now saying, riot. If you riot, you're going to go to prison. Of course you are. That's been law for years, decades. Civil unrest, smashing up your local high street, beating up police officers.
This is groundwork. This is groundwork for what's
your
to
local
come.
Supermarket.
Yeah,
that's criminal. You go to prison for that. What they're not saying is understand the difference between a peaceful protest and a riot. And I think anyone watching this show really needs to understand what the legal definition is of a protest, what is legally allowed, what you can do, what you can't do, familiarize yourself with the law and stick to the law. Because if you break the law, they are going to come down on you like a ton of bricks and you are going to be screwed. Yeah. And breaking the law is, sharing racial hatred, inciting violence, beating up police officers, refusing to, move out of a designated riot zone. Just don't find yourself in that situation. But I just find it strange that the government aren't sort of saying, well, look, this is the law. Know the law. Know what a riot is. They're kind of coercing people into thinking riots and protests are the same things. There's a very clear legal definition between the two, and I looked at the legal definition of those. Peaceful protests are, something that people are allowed to do. They've got freedom of speech. They can share their opinions if they're unhappy with something, but they can't incite violence and start smashing up the local towns. They can't threaten to slit people's throats. They can't threaten to burn down a Holiday Inn with immigrants in it.
Yeah. No, that's fair enough. Hey, Dan, we've blown over an hour. We need to wrap this up. But
good. All right.
It's been good. Really good chat. I've enjoyed it tonight. Well, I think we covered a lot.
Yeah. Does that mean you didn't enjoy the other ones?
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, pretty much, yeah. Where can people find you on X formerly known as Twitter?
Yeah, find me there. Just find me there. I have a little rant and a moan on there every now and again. But
link in the show notes if you want to follow Dan there. Is it at Dan __?
I think it's 3 underscores.
Right. It'll be a link in the show notes anyway, if you want to follow Dan on Twitter and see how he gets astroturfed on the regular.
And if anyone wants to share any legal authorities on international law in regards to weather manipulation, and what that is, and what the regulations are on the period that it can be done for, the period of rest that you need between doing these weather modification operations.
Yeah.
Then I'd really be interested in seeing that. So if there are any kind of legal eagles, solicitors, barristers, King's Counsel have got access to this stuff,
who aren't bought and paid for.
Pardon?
Who aren't bought and paid for already.
Oh yeah. Well, there are still good people out there.
There is, yes. We have to see we have to look for the positives. Well done. This has been wonderful. We shall sign off,
guys.
Yeah, nice to see you again. I'll drop you an email tomorrow. We're going to sign off now. Have a quick refreshment break.
Yes, toilet break.
We're going to open the phone lines in part 2 when we come back. Me and you, Matt.
Oh, great.
Open the phone lines and, come and chat to us if you like. If you found some of this conversation thought-provoking, you want to get stuff off your chest, or whatever, just want to say hello, give us a ring. We'll be back in about 10 minutes. All right. See you later, guys. Thanks for tuning in. Bye.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.